I never thought I'd watch an SUV disappear into my front lawn before breakfast. But there I was, coffee in hand, staring at Karen's giant pearl-white tank as it sank nose first into my grass like the earth had finally decided it had tolerated enough. One second she was hopping the curb like she owned the place. The next, her front wheels dropped, mud sprayed everywhere, and she came storming out of the driver's seat screaming like my begonias had personally assaulted her. And the craziest part was, I had built that moment for her. When I bought my house 3 years earlier, I had a small, boring dream work from home. Enjoy some peace and grow the kind of lawn old men slow down to admire on evening walks. I watered in the mornings, trimmed in the afternoons, pulled dandelions like they'd insulted my family. My yard wasn't just grass. It was therapy with roots. For a while, life was exactly that quiet. Then Karen moved in. She announced herself the way storms do, loud, fast, and impossible to ignore. Her SUV was huge, always spotless, and she drove it like every curb in the neighborhood was a suggestion. Within her first week, she started parking on my lawn, half the vehicle up on my grass like my yard was her private overflow lot. The first time I kept it polite. "Hey, would you mind not parking on the grass?" She laughed. "It's just a patch of lawn, sweetie." That should have told me everything. I tried signs. She knocked one over. I tried patience. She mistook it for weakness. I went to the HOA hoping for common sense and got a shrug. A day later, I found out why Karen was on the board. That explained the attitude, the immunity, the way she treated everyone else's property like it existed for her convenience. My friends told me to let it go. It's grass, they said. But once somebody keeps crossing a line after you've asked them not to, it stops being about the thing itself. It becomes about whether they believe you're allowed to have boundaries at all. Then came the rainy Wednesday that changed everything. I was in the kitchen making breakfast when I heard her engine outside. Same routine, same arrogance. I looked out the window and saw her SUV roll up over the curb onto the lawn. Only the ground had been soaking for 2 straight days. Her back tires spun once, then twice, flinging sod and mud behind her. The front end dipped. The whole vehicle stopped. Karen climbed out in heels in rain on wet grass, and one of them vanished straight into the mud. She shrieked at the weather, at the yard, at the universe. By the time I stepped onto the porch, she was pointing at my lawn like it had committed a felony. "Your grass ruined my car." And right there, standing in the rain, watching her sink into the mess she'd made for herself, I had an idea. If Karen wanted to treat my lawn like a parking lot, then maybe I needed a lawn that treated vehicles accordingly. The next day, I started researching. City ordinances, HOA bylaws, drainage rules, landscaping regulations. Buried in all that paperwork, I found my answer: a bioswale, a shallow landscape feature designed to absorb runoff and manage drainage. Good for the environment, city-friendly, HOA-friendly, and if designed creatively, deeply unfriendly to heavy SUVs. That was all I needed. I didn't build some cartoon trap. I built something beautiful. I mapped the slope, rerouted runoff, lined a basin below the edge of the yard, packed in water-holding clay-layered engineered soil over it, and finished everything with turf so pristine it looked fake. I added wetland markers, native rushes, decorative stones, even a couple frog statues, because once I understood how ridiculous this whole war had become, I decided to lean into it. And every inch of it was legal. Karen kept parking while I worked. She'd roll up, crush the edge of the grass, toss me that smug little look, and drive off like she was teaching me a lesson. What she didn't know was that every rut she made helped me refine the exact patch she loved most. 2 days of hard rain later, the trap was ready. Monday morning, the neighborhood still had that sleepy, half-awake sound, sprinklers clicking, garage doors opening, kids dragging backpacks to school. I was on my porch with coffee because by then I knew Karen's habits better than she did. Right on schedule, she came around the corner. She didn't hesitate. Didn't look, didn't think. She rolled straight up over the curb and onto that bright green patch she'd claimed for weeks. The surface gave almost politely at first. Then the rear tires followed and the whole SUV settled with a wet, ugly gulp. Karen tried reverse. The tires spun. She tried drive. They sank deeper. She stepped out and immediately went ankle deep into the mud with a sound so disgusting I almost respected it. Then the screaming started. Blinds opened all down the block. A dog started barking. Karen was pacing, cursing, accusing me of sabotage like I'd personally negotiated with gravity. I walked down the driveway nice and slow, took a sip of coffee, and asked, "Something wrong?" She whirled around. "You did this on purpose." I pointed to the wooden sign beside her buried front tire. "Caution, wetland restoration area, no vehicles." "I warned you," I said. That was already beautiful. Then the tow truck arrived. The driver took one look and seemed tired in his soul. He kept most of the truck on the road, ran the cable, and started winching. For one hopeful second, it looked like Karen might escape with only humiliation. Then the front wheels of the tow truck rolled a little too far onto the soaked edge. Down they went. And that's when the twist landed. Mrs. Alvarez from across the street, quiet, silver-haired, always trimming roses like she knew everyone's business, walked past the crowd, looked at the two stuck vehicles, and said, dead calm, "I told her this would happen." Then she held up her phone. Turns out she'd been taking pictures for weeks. Karen on my lawn, Karen knocking over my sign, Karen blocking the sidewalk. She looked at the crowd and said, "Some people only understand boundaries when the ground teaches them." That line spread through the neighborhood faster than the photos did. When the second tow truck finally came, a bigger one that stayed firmly on the asphalt, it pulled Karen's SUV and the first truck out one muddy foot at a time while people watched like it was a live event. The ruts left behind looked like a tractor fight had broken out in my yard. Karen came stomping toward me, splattered and furious. "You're malicious," she snapped. "You're obsessed with me." That's when I showed her my phone, the HOA approvals, the landscaping plan, the security footage, and Mrs. Alvarez's photos. "No," I said. "You were just so sure the rules didn't apply to you that you forgot other people can read them too." That afternoon, Karen filed an emergency complaint with the HOA, which might have worried me if I hadn't spent weeks building a paper trail thick enough to stun a horse. I walked into that meeting with permits, diagrams, timestamps, witness statements, drainage specs, the whole stack. Karen tried calling my lawn a community hazard until the city inspector flipped through the file and said the sentence that ended her argument on the spot. "This is fully compliant. Actually, it improves runoff management." You could feel the air leave her. Then Mrs. Alvarez, who had come just for the show, stood up in the back and said, "Maybe the hazard is people who keep parking where they've been told not to." Even the HOA president couldn't spin that one. From there, Karen unraveled. She filed nuisance complaints about my lights, my frogs, my landscaping noise, even mosquitoes. Every single complaint died under documentation. Then she got desperate. One night, a trail cam I'd hidden in a birdhouse caught her creeping onto my lawn with gravel and quickset mix, trying to harden the wet edge herself. Instead, the footage went to the HOA and the city. That was the end of her power. At the next meeting, another neighbor, a man who barely ever spoke, introduced a motion banning vehicle parking on any lawn in the neighborhood with escalating fines for repeat offenders. The vote passed almost unanimously. Karen had already been removed from the board over the conflict, so she sat there like a stone, while a rule inspired entirely by her own behavior got written into HOA policy. A few weeks later, a for sale sign appeared in her yard. No speech, no apology, no last burst of drama, just a sign. When the moving truck came, nobody waved. People like Karen always seem to think they'll leave scorch marks when they go. But she left the way entitled people hate most, quietly, without ceremony, without importance. After she moved out, my lawn healed beautifully. The bioswale filled in. Native grasses took hold. Actual frogs moved in, which felt almost too perfect. Kids started calling it the swamp garden. Mrs. Alvarez brought me a ceramic frog and sunglasses and told me every kingdom needs a mascot. Standing out there one evening listening to frogs croak while the last light hit the wetland grass, I realized the lesson wasn't really about revenge. Some people mistake kindness for surrender. They see patience and assume permission. They keep pushing until somebody finally says enough, and then they act shocked that the world has edges. I never yelled at Karen. I never touched her car. I never broke a rule. I just let consequences bloom. So yes, Karen came to my house thinking my lawn was just grass. By the end, it had swallowed her SUV, exposed her arrogance, changed the HOA rules, and sent her packing without me ever stepping outside the law. That's not exactly revenge. That's karma with landscaping. And I'll admit it. Every now and then when I'm sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee and I hear those frogs starting up at sunset, I look at that strip of perfect green and smile a little. Peace is nice. Peace that had to defend itself tastes even better. Now tell me, this was what I did justice, or was it revenge dressed up in native plants and city permits? And if someone kept crossing your line over and over, how far would you go to stop them without breaking the rules? Drop your take in the comments, and if you've ever dealt with a neighbor, HOA, or self-appointed tyrant who pushed too far, tell that story too. I know I'm not the only one who learned that karma sometimes shows up wearing muddy tires.